All right, thank you, Jess. As Jess said, name's Reece Freeman. So I serve as the contracts manager on the Smarts OTA under NSTXL. Just brief intro of what why I'm here and giving this presentation. I'm a licensed attorney. I've been working in the government contracting space for 7 years now, with a primary focus on the OTAs, specifically working to accelerate that delivery of innovative technology to the Department of Defense. So that's why NSTXL is here, and what we serve and hope to collaborate with industry on doing. So specifically, why we decided to put on this anatomy of a RFS is just to break down and provide industry with those tips and tricks, as far as to provide that best solution, and essentially what you can expect throughout this process, from our timelines and these different key areas. So to get right into the agenda as well. So we'll start out with the different key areas that make up the RFS. And then once we finish with that, we'll actually go into the timeline of RFS and those different deadlines and different points of emphasis throughout, from all the way from the coming soon notice to that final awards notice to the selected performers. And then we'll finish up with the live Q&A. So next, we have our platform that we utilize. So this is the NSTXL membership. We're now over 1,000 members strong at this point. With right now, we're sitting at 88% of non-traditional defense contractors. What that allows, with such a big consortium now, we can really foster that outreach and those teaming opportunities for our membership in order to provide that best value-driven solution to the government. Along with that, we'll get into it. There's many opportunities as far as for teaming arrangements and community outreach, and as well as how-to guides of how to provide that best solution moving forward. So we'll get into the next slide. And so this is where we're going to focus the majority of this webinar on, and these are the key elements of an RFS. This is where we see many of the pain points from our government customer, the different acquiring agencies that we work with. We'll start off with that technical scope and objectives, and this is essentially looking at the RFS and understanding the government's need or their problem statement or whatever capability gap they're providing, and knowing the end user and the goals within that problem statement, and providing that best value solution that clearly outlines your solution to the government's need. Second, we'll go into the eligibility and participation requirements. And so this is a big pain point as well. We always have questions on this. There are different elements you need to meet as far as eligibility to participate on these types of these prototype projects. So one is you must have an NSTXL membership. You can always do so through our website, and our team has done a great job of walking you through the steps of what's required for membership. One caveat to mention that has changed in recent times is no longer can you, as a subsidiary of a parent corporation, utilize that membership. You must yourself have your own membership with NSTXL. So important thing to remember there. Next is the actual statutory requirements under 10 USC 4022, and that is the prototype requirements. You must meet one of the three different eligibility requirements that's listed there. As well as not listed here was in order to do business with the Department of Defense, having a SAM.gov account and your own unique CAGE code that you're proposing underneath. The third point here, the submission requirements and evaluation criteria. So this is the actual documentation that you'll need to provide within your proposal. One thing I want to clarify is, because this is a pain point with our government customer, is knowing what's being asked for, knowing where we're at in the stage of the government kind of coming up with what the problem statement is going to be. So at times they will request a simple white paper or a simple rough order of magnitude, and then we will move into after that we will move into down selection, and then at that point in time, the government will those who are down selected will be required to submit a full technical proposal or concept as well as pricing information. So just kind of knowing as far as what the government's requesting for is a big one, so pay special attention. It's listed within the RFS, what's being required, either a white paper or a full technical concept. And so just wanted to clarify that because that's always a pain point that we see. And we'll finish up that last point there, the timeline and format for submissions, and we'll really just walk through the timeline of the life cycle of RFS. Like I said before, it starts with the coming soon notice and ends with that award notice. And so to kick things off, we'll go right into the technical scope and objectives. So like I said, we're really you're looking at when reviewing the RFS, you're looking at the problem statement, making sure it's clearly defined and you understand the government's need or their capability gap, and tailoring your approach specifically to that, with an emphasis on knowing what the goals of the project is going to be. That will also be listed within the RFS. If you ever have questions with understanding the government's need or the problem statements provided, we will get into this later on this presentation, but there's always plenty of opportunity to ask questions to the government, whether that be a project talks that happens or the actual RFS Q&A period that happens. So if there's ever any ambiguity within that problem statement, the government is always open to hearing those questions and tailoring that problem statement as need be. Another big problem area that we see within the technical scope and objectives section is when the government is asking for a varied amount of technology areas within the RFS. I get this question a lot of how does a respondent or industry approach that? Well, you can do it one or two ways, and it'll typically be listed within the RFS. You can clearly differentiate your proposals to each technology area within one proposal. You just need to clearly separate those out. Or if desired, you can split those different technology areas among multiple proposals. So there's nothing saying that you can't submit more than one proposal for multiple technology areas. And that goes for the same technology areas. If you have, varied approaches that you want to provide to the government, you can certainly do so within multiple proposals as well. But this special emphasis focusing on the desired outcomes and goals listed within the RFS within your approach. And then I will hold, if we have any questions, each key area that I go through, I'll hold for questions for just a moment if we have any pop up.
Looks like we don't have any in the Q&A yet, Reece.
Awesome. And if you have any that pop up, you're welcome to save those for the end as well, and we can address them at that point. So the next key area that we find, eligibility and participation requirements. Like I mentioned before, that first step is being a part of the NSTXL consortium. You can access those details for opportunities by being a member, and you can do so through the NSTXL webpage as far as finding out how to sign up. Second is anytime you're doing business with the Department of Defense, you have to have that active SAM.gov account as well as your own unique cage code. So whatever entity is proposing, that's the cage code that you're going to utilize. Please try to refrain from using, parent corporation cage codes. If your entity's name is not the one listed as far as underneath that cage code, try to use your cage code that you have an account with, because that kind of throws off our compliance checks that we have. That third bullet point here, this actual statutory requirement. So there's three main areas that you can receive eligibility under the 10 USC 4022 statute. And that's essentially being having at least one non-traditional defense contractor or nonprofit research institution participating to a significant extent in the prototype project. That second area B, all significant participants in the transaction other than the federal government or small businesses. And C is the cost sharing requirement. At least 1/3 of the total cost of the prototype project is be paid out by funds provided by sources other than the federal government. And so in order to get ahead of likely some questions that we receive on the statutory requirement. So if you're new to the OTA environment, so one of the biggest questions we have is, well, what constitutes as a non-traditional defense contractor? And that is essentially listed under the 10 USC 4022 statute. It's a company that's not worked in a FAR-based DoD contract with full cost accounting standards for within the last 12 months. And so the intent of the statute and the prototype atmosphere is to elicit or gather support from innovators from the small business community. And so that's why that is a requirement, or one of the avenues as a requirement within the statute. The other little blurb here to put on is not only what is a non-traditional defense contractor, but what is participating to a significant extent. So this is a gray area within the statute. It has not been clarified to date. Essentially, significant extent is not tied to a specific dollar value or a specific percentage that a non-traditional is participating. It's essentially making sure that the non-traditional is actively contributing to the technical execution, development, or delivery of the solution, basically providing a value added, and not essentially serving as a passive subcontractor or being added in name only. So they are providing some value to the project, and that will be a requirement within, it's listed within the RFS. If you have any non-traditionals that you're pairing with or teaming with, that you provide, you elaborate on their participation within your solution. So that is it for that key area. Moving on to the next, unless there's any questions.
There was one question, Reece, that you might
Okay.
address later on,
Sure.
are there specific question periods or can they be asked at any time prior to submission date?
So questions can be asked at any point in time, but they're specific, and we'll get into the timeline. Once a RFS is posted, there will be NSTXL will hold a project talk, which is basically a live webinar similar to what we have here, where industry is able to ask their questions on the RFS directly to the evaluators themselves, or at least a portion of the evaluation team. If you're not able to attend the project talks, what typically happens too is any questions that we receive, we have a deadline of typically 7 to 10 days after the RFS is posted to receive those questions from industry or respondents. And the government will then answer each of those questions, and we will then go out and post that as far as that Q&A directly to the website underneath our opportunities tab again. And so you can ask your questions at any point in time, but it's almost better to wait until the opportunity comes out to fully know what the problem statement is and any detailed questions you would have. At that point in time, the government is able to answer them. So we get plenty of time. And if there's ever an instance where we're getting a lot of questions and the government has to answer them in a timely fashion, we might even extend that deadline as far as that question deadline period to allow for more questions to come in. So that happens when we have a particularly vague problem statement that would come in. So we're always happy to facilitate that. But like I said, there's opportunities for when those questions usually come in.
Perfect. That was it.
And then, yep, appreciate that. It's a great question. One other thing, as far as on that fast back side over there, like I mentioned before, you only need to meet one of the requirements under the 4022 statute. We typically see, as far as tips and tricks, a lot of times we see respondents falling underneath that first D1A, that non-traditional defense contractor status. And if you're a bigger prime and you're looking for those non-traditionals and everything, that's what we're here at NSTXL to do. That's why we have the consortium, is to provide those teaming and collaboration opportunities for industry to come together and provide the best solution to the government. And so with that, we'll move on to the next key area. That is the submission requirements section. So this is the crux of what you will actually need to submit with your proposal. So within the RFS, it's we have it templated as far as exactly how it's you should be providing your proposal, what the structure and the form, as well as it will be listed, what type of documents required at this time. Are we looking for just a rough outline, known as a white paper, essentially, as far as your technical concept, or a rough order of magnitude for your pricing and cost info? Or are we at the stage where the government's wanting a full technical proposal and pricing information? So again, like I said before, kind of watch out for that, and that will give you more of an understanding of how this RFS, the timeline, is going to proceed from there. Because like I said before, typically you'll have a white paper and ROM period. There'll be a down selection as far as for respondents to move forward. And then at that point in time, those down selectees will provide a technical concept or pricing information. Along with the actual format of your submission documents, there's certain attachments that are provided within RFS, and they'll be listed. Ones that are always there, I'll briefly discuss your section 889, which is your standard prohibition on certain telecommunications equipment. And so there's certain areas that you must check off and sign to within that document. Like I said, it's always in the RFS, so be prepared for that form. One of the changes we made within the last year is actually adding our SMARTS performer agreement and the supplemental IP agreement templates to the RFS itself, in order, if there's any exceptions or red lines that need to be made, within those two documents, that you can do so at that time. Again, that's our terms and conditions documents. One is our main agreement. The other one is essentially your IP and data rights agreement. Any exceptions, like these documents, are provided to the government team. And so that is a criteria. Obviously, if there's heavy exceptions made, they will weigh that as far as, their best value judgments as well. But one of the questions that I receive is, do we start, negotiations at that time once we receive, these red line exemption or exceptions within the performer agreement and IP agreement? We do not at that point in time. It's a basis to understand as providing the entire proposal to the government team, because that is part of the proposal, is your contract terms and conditions as well. Once an award decision is made, we will actually reach out, and we'll get to this later on in the slide deck here. We'll actually reach out to the selected performers. We'll begin negotiations at that time with your any exceptions you made to the performer agreement and the IP agreement. And so those are pain points that we see as far as if you don't provide any exceptions to the agreement and IP agreement at the time of submission on the proposal, it's not necessarily waived. I want to make that known. Negotiations are ongoing until each party has signed the agreement. It just helps speed up the process if we can start working on those answers to those red lines once they're received, and we can help streamline that negotiation process. Next is, depending on the security classifications of the RFS, if we have any classified data that's being provided, or CUI, you'll have your DD-254, essentially your facility clearance that you'll need to have provided, as well as the DD-2345, which is specifically, as you can see in the fast facts, is when you need to handle or access DoD unclassified export control technical data. You can think of these as when the government's going to be providing technical specs or drawings to help facilitate the proposal submissions, so you have more of a clear picture of the problem statement. The last bit here is the evaluation criteria. So special emphasis on this as well. NSTXL does not participate in the evaluation process. That is an inherently government function that we are not privy to. This is once evaluations have started, we don't get a whole lot of communication other than having a rough idea of who the selected performers will be, or if the government is going to be opening or is wanting to elicit further information from specific respondents via, discussions or pitch day presentations. That's when we will reach out to performers to facilitate those discussions. And another question we usually get is, what is the actual evaluation criteria that the government utilizes? That's provided directly within the RFS. I won't specifically list it here because it changes from time to time, so I don't want to give you deceptive information, but those certain criteria bullets are listed directly within the RFS itself. And so we can move on to why this matters. And so why are we here today? Why does this matter? Why is the anatomy of a RFS critical for any respondent? Well, here's kind of the main things that come to mind when I do compliance checks and I see these proposals come in. By kind of going through this exercise here, you have more of an understanding of particular pain points that the government has, and you can kind of understand how you should tailor your solution to be more value driven to the government. Specifically, looking at the problem statement, make sure you understand it. If you don't, there's plenty of opportunity to ask your specific questions in order to clarify, as well as looking at not only the problem statement, but the government will provide additional information within the RFS as to the goals and even the end user, for the prototype. So that also helps you provide additional information to tailor your approach to this specific RFS. Next, that's very, very important as far as to determine your eligibility and identify your teaming needs early so you can get the right resources in place, so that when you go through this process of providing an excellent proposal, that you're not tripped up as far as not being eligible or not meeting the requirements of the statute in order to even propose on the project. So knowing what your eligibility is and knowing if you need to have a teaming or a non-traditional contractor on your team early is very important, and that's where we provide all those different collaboration opportunities, from innovator networks to different industry days to all the other different events that our great team puts on as far as to facilitate these teaming arrangements. Next is the optimizing your resource allocation. So understanding the submission timelines, understand being from industry, very important. You got to get your team in place. You got to get the right team members ready for when this opportunity falls, if you are selected to move on with the project, instead of not knowing the submission timelines and not knowing the life cycle of the RFS. Means you may be potentially pulling resources from a different project and have those employees or staff waiting without an idea of when these RFSs are going to close and when a award decision is going to be made. So understanding the submission timeline allows you to optimize your resources effectively. And last, this preparing for your compliance negotiations, submission logistics, knowing what terms are on the table. As far as this is why we made a decision to provide the performer agreement and the IP agreement within the RFS, because it allows you to get a firsthand look at it instead of an award decision being made and then we start negotiations, and it delays the kickoff of these awards by however long it takes to come to a meeting of the minds on it. Providing that up front as far as your compliance checks that you need, whether negotiations are going to be needed, as well as the timeline for submission, allows you to effectively have an inside look into this RFS process that maybe not a lot of others have who wouldn't have attended this webinar. So we will go into the actual timeline now. We'll go through each phase of the RFS from, like I said, the coming soon, all the way to the award notice. And so as you can see, it looks like a lengthy process, but it's really not. There's just a lot of different events that happen in a short amount of time in order to facilitate that collaboration, as far as any questions that need to be answered. And then, whether a down select is going to occur, then ending with your award notice. So moving to the first set, your coming soon notice, as well as your industry day and innovator networks. We'll go ahead and jump to the next slide. So your coming soon notice, this is what happens once we have communications from the acquiring agency or our government customer that there is an opportunity that's going to be soon released. We provide this coming soon email, as well as notification on our community board. As far as just a brief kind of introduction of what project's coming down and what technology area it's going to be targeting, as far as that will let different industry entities prepare for this specific technology area that they may be within. As fast facts over here, opportunities are fully vetted before they are posted on the website. So if it is a coming soon, you can I wouldn't say you can guarantee that it's going to come to fruition. A lot of times, sometimes these are delayed due to the government getting funding in line, or wanting to add different tasking to this particular problem statement. But once posted, membership is informed within 24 hours. And rough timeline as far as tips and tricks, it's roughly 3 to 5 weeks from the coming soon notice to when the actual RFS is released to industry. So moving on. So the engage and team. So this is our community. There's community platform. Again, our goal is to help improve your approach to increase your chances of providing the best proposal you can and winning work on these prototype projects. We have our different teaming platform, our community help boards, in order to help you easily engage with other members and provide those teaming arrangements so you can meet those eligibility requirements, or not only just meet those eligibility requirements, but make your proposal and the structure of your team as value driven to the government as you can be. Different features you can see include our member directory, discussion posts and threads on different opportunities and technical areas, or technology areas, as well as incoming events, and as well as our overall resource center, where we hope to keep adding more how-tos as far as for industry to utilize. So how-tos including how to propose or how to utilize our website in the submission process, and kind of tips and tricks in that approach. So moving to the next. So our innovator network is, as you can read here, is a virtual teaming event where innovators connect with companies interested in collaborating on specific opportunities. And you can think of different, specific technology areas and sharing their capabilities with each other, their DoD experience and their potential roles. If you're looking to be a prime or you're looking to be a sub on specific opportunities, this is your time to do so, as far as to communicate and connect with different members of the NSTXL network. It happens during the coming soon stage. So right after the coming soon happens, the innovator network will not be far behind. You'll just have to look at as far as the actual date that gets posted. Who conducts it? So NSTXL is the one who facilitates it, and specifically our Smarts director and the Smarts program marketing team are the ones who facilitate that. It involves presenters. You'll sign up beforehand. You'll have 3 slides, 5 to 7 minutes to present on your capabilities and your intent as far as being a prime or a sub. And anyone can join. So it's just a great opportunity to use that networking function to start putting together your team as far as getting ready for your proposal stage. So next, we'll go into the RFS posting. And this is a simple little blurb here as far as, where does this information come from as far as within the RFS? Well, it comes directly from the acquiring agency, and it comes through a document, an internal document that they have called the Prototype Acquisition Approach, the PAA. Essentially what happens is NSTXL works with the acquiring agency once they've passed their board approvals, to go through with these specific opportunities. NSTXL will adapt the PA document to the RFS and then have strategy meetings with the acquired agency to further elaborate on different points that are needed before the RFS is actually released. And so once it's released, we are hoping to, I'll get to that later. That'll be under the proposal submission section. So that's essentially where this information comes from. So NSTXL doesn't create this out of thin air. We work hand in hand with the specific acquiring agency to tailor these RFSs or these solutions to what industry can expect as far as the RFSs that we provide. So moving on to our project talk section that happens after the RFS posting. So as I mentioned before, this is an opportunity. If you ever have any questions about the problem statement or any questions in general that are specific to an opportunity, because these project talks will be specific. They won't be open to every opportunity. They'll be specific to each RFS that comes out. And so this essentially is a virtual industry day. It sparks the discussions on specific opportunities, allowing industry to hear from the government as far as if they want to elaborate on the problem statement or any additional end users or goals that they have. They'll certainly provide that to you at that time. But it's really industry's opportunity to ask your questions in real time directly to the technical leads and the evaluators for these solutions in order to help you improve your proposal. This also happens at the current stage. Directly after the RFS is posted, it won't be long behind because we're looking for a short turnaround as far as getting these questions to the government before industry starts creating these proposals. Again, who conducts this? NSTXL. Same individuals as far as the Innovator Networks is our Smarts Director and the Smarts Program Marketing Team. It involves an agenda overview. The government will go through and explain the opportunity, the problem statement, end user, any goals that they have. And then NSTXL team asks any previously submitted questions, and then we'll go into a live Q&A from there. And again, anyone can join. So moving on to the...
Reece, we did just have a question.
Okay.
Are these virtual sessions anonymous to the other competition innovators?
I believe you have the opportunity to do so to make yourself anonymous on the when you create a sign-in, into these different events. Also, you can tailor your question to be anonymous, or you can save your question if you don't want to ask it during the project talks in a live environment. You can certainly save it for the RFS Q&A. We could tailor those questions if it is something that involves proprietary information or is confidential to your company. We certainly won't release those questions out to industry when we release that final RFS Q&A.
Perfect. That was it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. So moving on to this goes hand in hand with the project talks is this RFS questions and the government response kind of time period. And so questions are submitted. You have the ability, as you can see from the screenshots here, to submit through the opportunity page. What we do is we facilitate those questions. We condense them into a format for the government, and any similar questions we'll condense those down into one, so it's not too lengthy of a document for the government. But essentially we collaborate with the acquiring agency to work with the government to provide timely responses to the questions that we receive. The questions and answers are then posted to the NSTXL opportunity page. That RFS Q&A window, it'll be listed on the specific RFS, you can kind of see in the screenshot here, the response deadlines are typically 7 to 10 days after the RFS is posted. But like I kind of mentioned before earlier in the webinar, if we are getting a lot of questions and there is a need to expand the time window for that, we can certainly do so. It's on a as needed basis. And then again, if there's any questions that are left over from the project talks, you can certainly provide those within the RFS Q&A, or if you want to elaborate, you're able to do so. And as our answered our previous question here, if you have information specifically you want to provide to the government that includes proprietary or confidential information, just let us know that. We could probably glean that from the question anyway, but we will certainly not provide those. We'll provide those to the government and get you your answer specifically. They just will not, that Q&A portion, that specific question will not be provided with the rest on our opportunities page. And so moving on, the proposal submission and deadline. So the NSTXL website is very intuitive. We've taken an approach of industry of asking those questions. What does industry want to see as far as when we're proposing? How do we streamline this? How do we make it easier for respondents to provide these proposals without being overly cumbersome or hitting those IT errors that you tend to see. So everything is submitted through the NSTXL website. We use JotForm as far as our automation, and what happens from there is we will have different. You can see kind of from the screenshot as far as we'll have different drop downs for each section of the RFS as far as when you're going to be each attachment that's required, sort of as a checklist, if you may, as far as the different documents that you need to provide, and make sure that you're getting those. You haven't forgot to submit something or whatnot. So it's very intuitive. We really take an emphasis on helping industry get these proposals to us in a timely fashion and not have to go back and forth as far as needless asking for documents that you may have had just forgot to submit. So it's very intuitive, and as you can see right there in the slide, we are coming out with a how-to guide for submitting proposals and kind of a overall approach to those different drop downs and what's required. But as always, if you have any questions with it, you're welcome to reach out to our marketing team or myself as far as any problems that you're having with the website and submitting your proposals. So move on to the down select and the evaluation portion. So you can see from the screenshot here, this was one of our more complicated RFSs. So this involved having a white paper and a ROM that had to be submitted, and then we had actual a down select occurred, and we had virtual pitches instead of a full-fledged technical proposal and pricing proposal being provided. These were still provided, but they were doing it in a actual virtual pitch. So you can have a virtual pitch or you can have in person, but you're actually have a live presentation with the government team. You'll get asked questions in a Q&A during that period. So this is one of our more complicated as far as RFS structures. But just be aware of what's being required, and this will be as outlined in the screenshot within the RFS, the different requirements as far as the phase, and giving you an idea of the timeline as well of when you can expect proposals to be due as far as the down selection, as well as the overall tentative award date. Our team is very good as far as communicating. Anytime we get information from the government that these timelines are going to shift or are going to slip, we always let the industry know that ahead of time, so you can be prepared and aren't wondering, well, the award date was June 23rd. What's going on? Why is there such a delay? So we'll always provide that feedback to you ahead of time. Going into kind of the bullet points over here of who's involved at this point, the down selection evaluation. So again, limited information is shared with us during the evaluation phase for obvious purposes. It is an inherently government function as far as the evaluation. What we do is facilitate if there's any clarification needed from the government team as far as for specific proposals. They will at times ask for additional discussions to be had. And so we will facilitate those meetings with the government. Typically, what happens is the government will provide their specific questions that they have on your proposal ahead of time before this meeting. You'll have plenty of time to review them and provide answers, and then you'll have a live Q&A during that discussion meeting in order to help the government help clarify and help them be better performed in their evaluation decision. What is the criteria? Again, as I said before, it's within the RFS. It changes from time to time, so I'm not going to list those. There's different bullet points within the RFS that discusses the actual evaluation criterias and the associated risk with each of the criterias. And then anytime there's a down selection that's going to occur, we will provide additional information on the format that's going to happen, as well as whether it's virtual or in person and what the government's wanting at that time. If they're wanting a full technical proposal and pricing response. The government does always reserve the right to award multiple awards on any project. So it's not always a one for all approach. So depending on the different solutions that they get to the problem, they may, in the end, award multiple awards. Quick tip over here, as far as RFS close to award is on average 3 to 4 months. Again, that's an average. Sometimes there's delays due to funding requirements or due to a lengthy evaluation process, but that is typically our timeline from when the RF closes to when an actual award decision is made. So hopefully that's a tip right there that can help you kind of prepare your resources accordingly. So moving on to the award notice. And so this is a snapshot of our template of what gets sent out to each selected performer on a project. So this is to inform them that you've been selected for award. These are the different documents to review. A lot of these will have already been provided beforehand, but this is our chance to finalize these documents with each performer and make sure there's a meeting of the minds and that we're good to go. There will also be an estimated kickoff date. So what happens typically after the award notice is you'll be reached out to other members of the NSTXL team, our client success team, that will schedule a kickoff with yourselves and the government to go through your proposed solution and just iron out any details. May it be, milestone schedules, maybe revising the statement of work at that time. NSTXL will work with you as well as finalizing the performer agreement terms and conditions. And then, we'll verify that, funds have been obligated and placed on contract. And once that happens, we're ready to execute, and you'll have, certain go-ahead dates as far as within your milestones to go ahead and kick this off. Another quick tip, it typically takes 2 weeks to go from performer selection to project commencement, depending on the project. So sometimes it's going to be a matter of days, as it'd be up to 2 weeks. That depends on where we're at in negotiations as well. So with that, we can go into, so again, tips for a successful submission. So this is kind of my cheat sheet here of going through. So again, read the RFS thoroughly, highlight any key compliance points. If you're unsure of something or you feel that it doesn't apply to you, you're always able to reach out to our team, or you're able to provide that, within that RFS Q&A or project talk sessions. Knowing the timeline allows you to start early and assign, your internal leads for each section. Just understanding the timeline will enable you to, muster your resources effectively. Do engage in our innovator networks and project talks for insights. There's maybe something, an approach that you weren't aware of that, another respondent is taking, and maybe that's something that interests you in a different technical area. So there's always things you can elicit from those meetings. So not only whether you're going to team up with someone, but where industry's at and different ideas that may be applied to this solution. Again, our website is very good about helping you triple check as far as you have all the required attachments are included, but just finalize that, review the RFS. It'll be listed out those different required attachments and make sure you have all of them submitted. Last but not least, use the resources through the NSTXL website. including our facts and our Q&As, for anytime you need to clarify any uncertainties about the RFS process or the RFS itself. So move into the next one. So these are common questions that we get, and hopefully I answered a decent amount of them within the this webinar itself. So again, what documentation is required and when? So that'll be directly listed within the RFS. So typically, you have whether it's a white paper or a full technical proposal, as well as the different attachments. Those are required at the proposal submission deadline. One big question we always get if you're new to the OTA environment, again, is that what counts as significant participation or what is a non-traditional. So hopefully I explained that a little bit more. If you have any additional questions on that, I'm happy to walk you through that. The third question, can we negotiate IP or pricing before award? So I kind of elaborated on this, is typically we do not. We want to get those exceptions to the requested, government data rights that they're wanting, as well as our standard terms and conditions during the proposal submission process. So we have those, and the government can evaluate those accordingly, and we can have an idea of getting started on those negotiations before an award happens, and then we have to go through lengthy negotiations and push out the timeline of the project. And what is the average timeline from submission to award? Like I said before, it's typically from proposal submission deadline to award. It can take up to 3 to 4 months. 4 months is typically our longer portion if that's a particular lengthy evaluation process is happening. You'll see that typically if we have down selects that happen, and then we have multiple rounds of discussions, and then we go into that award notice. But typically it's quicker than that. That is our goal, is to streamline this process and make it much quicker than you see in the FAR realm. And so we typically have success with that, but sometimes there's things that are outside of our control that we have to wait for the government team to facilitate. So, but with all this information, you can see that the drive is to put industry and our consortium in the best place to provide, the best solution that they can. And that really comes from understanding, the anatomy in RFS and what the key areas are and what the timeline associated with it is. So with that, we can go into our live Q&A.
Perfect. Yeah, Reece, after you were just talking about that, we had a couple questions around the same thing, which is, are companies who proposed under an RFP notified of who won, or just whether or not they were selected or not? And how does feedback work, requesting feedback and that sort of thing?
Great question, because I did not touch on this in here. So every respondent is notified of the award decision. We'll let you know as far as the GAR's decision, who was awarded, and kind of what next steps are. Typically what happened in the past is we used to have a little paragraph in that notice to all respondents, if you weren't selected, that NSTXL would hold on to your proposal for up to 36 months in order to put you essentially what the government term is, be in the parking lot in case any other opportunities were to arise. Or if that particular solicitation was to have additional tasking that was added to it and your proposal fit in within that framework. Now the decision has been made that we keep those in perpetuity, because 36 months, I mean, I don't know where that arbitrary kind of timeline came from, but now we keep it in perpetuity in case a particular solution comes up that fits within your solution. And what we would do at that point in time, if that happened, we would communicate with you and we would get updated pricing and whatnot due to the delay from when you proposed to when you were pulled out of the parking lot. So everyone is notified. As far as if you aren't selected, as far as debriefing goes, it's listed in the RFS that the government does not do any debriefings for these projects. It's just it's a decision that every acquiring agency can make. So you'll have to double check and within each RFS if there is any debriefings to happen. But unfortunately, for most of ours, we don't see any debriefings occur.
Okay, we had another question. Are you focused only on DoD RFPs, or do you cover all agencies with items that may be considered defense-oriented, DOE, for example?
We hope to. So right now with the smarts portfolio, DOE doesn't fit within our technical scope that we have. So right now we are limited to DoD, but that is in the works in the future of getting adding a different contracting instrument outside of what we have right now with smarts and spec and T-Rex, adding another one that would include the DOE. But right now we are limited to just DoD OTAs.
I guess kind of along with that, question says, it seems most RFS opportunities are out of Navy Crane. Is Navy Crane the main service using NSTXL smarts?
Yes, and so for our smarts portfolio, we have had discussions in the past as far as having write-on authority for different agencies potentially, but that is with the acquiring agency. That is with NSWC Crane if they would allow that within the smarts portfolio. But yes, you're correct. Our primary agency that we work with is NSWC Crane for the smarts portfolio.
Perfect. Another question that you may have covered earlier was, does NSTXL hold any seats on the source selection board?
We do not. So with the evaluation committee is made up of government government personnel. At times it will be made up of CETA contractors as well, and so that's provided at the very end of the RFS. There is a discussion if there's any CETA contractors, they will be listed on there. And with their cage code and their company name, and there's also that avails industry if at that time they want to have a NDA with these specific CETA contractors, they're more than willing to do so. I will provide additional clarifying information that the government already has NDAs that are set up with these CETA contractors before they're allowed to even be on the evaluation committee. But we always avail the opportunity of industry if they want to have NDAs with these specific CETA contractors, they're able to do so. But NSTXL as a contractor, we don't sit on those evaluation committees. We simply run the compliance checks on these proposals when they come through, and then transfer them to the government team. And then after that, we facilitate ongoing discussions if they're needed.
Perfect. We have a minute or two. If anybody else has any more questions, you can come off mute or continue putting them in the Q&A feature. One question is, does NSTXL handle the production contracts which could result upon completion of a successful prototype agreement?
Great question. So within a RFS, it'll list if it's anticipated that a particular solution may go into production, and we would at that time. It would be depending on certain outcomes. There's certain elements that must be met. One, you must have successfully completed the. I'm trying to remember. There's two requirements. You must have successfully completed the prototype. And so there's an opportunity as well that if the opportunity was competed up front, which all of our RFSs are, that we would go into a non-competition as far as for that follow-on production phase. And so once you would, it's not all together at the forefront when we're going through this RFS when it's posted, whether it's anticipated 100% that a production follow-on is anticipated. The government can elaborate on that within the RFS, but I think we have a standard boilerplate language in there that all of them are hopefully anticipated for follow-on. But there's just it's whether the government wants to proceed with that and whether those two elements were met. Whether it was competed and we can go into non-competition solicitation, and then whether the prototype actually came to fruition was completed as well. And that doesn't mean every aspect of it. It would be up to the government team whether to identify if the project was a success.
Perfect. Okay, we are a minute or two over now, so we will go ahead and end this call. But thank you so much, Reece, for your time today. That was an awesome presentation. I think super helpful. Thank you so much for everyone that was on this call today. We hope it really gave you a clearer picture of what to expect and how to prepare to navigate for upcoming projects. As always, feel free to reach out to our team at membership@nstxl.org if you have any questions. You will be receiving a follow-up email with the recording, slides, and FAQ shortly. So that is it for now. Thank you again. We will see you
Thank you
all
all.